Hi there, everybody. My name is Lauren Spring, and I'm an art educator with the Art Gallery of Ontario. And I'm really glad you're joining us today. I see there's still a number of people signing on with their video, connecting to audio, which is great. We've got a wonderful turnout. And I'm so happy that you're here. So this is a really special event that we're running here virtually today. And we're part of a much bigger international community that is celebrating, I suppose celebrating is the word, celebrating, experiencing Slow Art Day. And so this is taking place at over 200 museums around the world right now. And if you're here, I imagine you know a little bit about what it is. You probably read a short description, at least on our website, and have a sense of what this experience is going to be like. But others, might have just signed up and part of the newsletter and saw the event. And so I just want to prepare you. And also this session is being recorded, and so folks at home might watch on a different day. So essentially, Slow Art Day is about deep looking at paintings, at sculptures, at any sort of work of art that you happen upon or have carefully selected. And that's what we're going to do this year in this virtual realm. Perhaps by next year, we could be in person in the museum together. But it really is about looking deeper. And those of you who've joined me for tours and workshops before, or who have come to other experiences and tours at the AGO, might have a particular idea of what tours are like. Typically, maybe in an hour period, we'll look at 5 to 7 or 8 works of art, and I'll scaffold what we observe with lots of information about the artist's biography and or the art historical period. And this is a little bit different. So this is less informative, perhaps, and to a certain extent, and a lot more experiential. So I have selected 3 different works of art to share with you today that for me are ones that anytime I come across them in the AGO, I just want to spend more time with them. I sort of find myself lingering, and it never seems like there's been enough time. And so personally, I thought that these would be great choices for Slow Art Day. But around the world, people are being encouraged to go into a museum space and either kind of wander around and just find the work that speaks to them in that particular moment and spend a lot more time with it, or perhaps one that you've sought out in advance or, passed by quickly on another occasion and thought, oh, geez, there's a lot going on here, and I really want an occasion to spend more time. We know research has shown that on average, people only spend about 8 seconds when they're walking through a gallery or museum space, only 8 seconds looking at a work on a wall or in the middle of the floor, if it's a sculpture, for example. And that's not really much time. And so Slow Art Day is really about slowing down and maybe feeling things, observing things that we wouldn't if we spent only a flash of 8 seconds with these pieces. So it might feel, all of that to say, it might feel a little different than what you're used to experiencing at the AGO or on your own walking through a gallery space. So I'd say just kind of go with the flow, and we'll take some deep breaths together. Hopefully you're seated comfortably wherever you are. There'll probably be a lot of silence in this tour too. I'll introduce the slide with an image on it, and we'll probably start with about a minute of just kind of silent looking. And if you want to, if you have a pencil and paper, I do beside me, if you want to just kind of write down things that come up for you, whether it's what you observe or what you feel when you're looking at the piece, that's a great way of processing. If you want to just really take it in and not worry about pencil and paper or noting anything down and just sort of breathe with the art, that's absolutely fine too. Really, there's no wrong way to do Slow Art Day, except if you were to do it much too fast. So we will take our time today. And also, those who want to share what they're observing, what they're feeling, I really would welcome that. We have a rather large group, which I'm really excited about, and you can share your ideas and your thoughts either in the chat, if you want to just type them out, or you're also welcome at any point to also unmute yourself and share your voice with us. I'd certainly welcome that too. And maybe before we officially get started looking at the pieces, I'll just ask the group if there are any questions or anything people want to know about or say before we launch into looking at some of these images. Seems like we're all set. Okay, so let's take a deep breath. Here's a photograph. This isn't one, although you could spend a good amount of time looking at the architecture in the AGO too. It's a great sort of meditative place. A lot of people find it a bit of an oasis in the hustle and bustle of busy downtown Toronto. So never hesitate to just come and spend a few hours sitting in Galleria Italia, right here behind this facade, or marveling at our Baroque staircase. It is really a work of art in and of itself. And the doors are open again now. I'll also take a moment to acknowledge that the land the AGO is on is Mississauga Anishinaabe territory, Mississauga. It is also governed by a treaty between the Mississauga of the Credit and the Canadian government. Toronto is Mississauga Anishinaabe territory. It has also been occupied by other Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat confederacies. And just one final thing I'll note before we start to look at the images is that because this is about deep looking and much less scaffolding of outside exterior information and much more about sort of your own responses, just be ready. There might be some emotions that you don't expect that sort of slowly come to the surface or quickly surface. And I haven't selected images that are particularly provocative or necessarily difficult to look at. But again, these things are really subjective depending on your own experiences, what you've been reading in the news lately. We certainly are bombarded by images all the time that just, we are probably processing on some kind of subconscious level. So it wouldn't be surprising if some of the things you see you might relate to contemporary events going on right now that could be difficult in nature. So yeah, I'd say just be gentle with yourself, try to ground yourself in breath, and we'll move through things as we do. Okay, so this work of art by Käthe Kollwitz is the first one that I've selected to share with you. And like I mentioned at the outset, let's just take a minute. We'll start with just a full minute of just looking. And there's no wrong way to do it. You might pay attention to what you notice right away, and then what other elements of the piece, emotions that arise, the longer you spend with the work. So I'll time us, and we'll just have 1 minute of silent looking, and then we'll discuss some more. All right. It's interesting because I thought a minute might feel long because I'm used to, speaking on camera and on Zoom, but it didn't feel like quite long enough. So some of you might have had that same feeling. Others might be really ready to share some of what you observed. So why don't we open the floor? And if you want to, again, you could type into the chat, or you could unmute yourself and maybe either start with feelings that surfaced when you were really observing this work and all aspects of it. Or it could also be perhaps words that came to mind, emotions that the characters might be feeling here, the people being represented, or also just visibly what you noticed, where your eye was drawn. Anything at all is fine. And I'll share some of my thoughts and feelings too, but I'd welcome anyone else who wants to start us off if you feel so inclined. We have Trudy here in the chat saying the agony of the mother whose hands are not filled with her children. First time I focused on this when looking at this piece. Wow, yeah, that's true. That's really powerful, isn't it? Because we have, one of the things that strikes me is, that sort of interlocking and this sort of, where does one person end and another begin? And then this figure here who's still connected to the wider group, but yeah, doesn't have her children in her arms. And that's such a powerful word, that agony. And certainly, yeah, this figure brings a whole other dimension to this work. So Camille, it reminds me of families sticking together and supporting one another during difficult times. Yeah. Yeah, I find compositionally it's so fascinating how they're grouped, right? And Katie Kollwitz often does that, whether in her etchings, her drawings, her sculptures. There's often groups of sort of, especially women and children, that are just sticking together, I suppose, is a good way of putting it. Jean is saying, my eye was drawn to the figure at the bottom right, the only one without a face. Made me think about why that is. Interesting. Yeah, that's I suppose, you're meaning right down here, eh, Jean? I didn't even get that far in my looking. I was focused on this small child too, whose face is much more faded. But you're right, it seems that there's a figure down here too. And I wonder, Jane, you're saying that you wonder why that why that is. Did your mind go anywhere? Did you create sort of some other narrative about why there might be this kind of faceless figure? And then Mary Lou is saying, Ukrainian refugees or refugees from any country, feelings afraid, concerned, uncertain, protecting. Black parts of image denote darkness, war. White parts denote hope. Yeah, that's one of the really powerful things with this one here is a lithograph. And Kate Kollwitz did a lot of printmaking too, which obviously is primarily sort of that interplay between light and dark and black and white. And so all of those big emotions related to those things, certainly. And we were talking about being bombarded by images on a daily basis. And certainly right now, the war in Ukraine is front of mind. And very easily, this was created in 1919, but certainly resonates today. Michael is saying, my eyes are drawn to the eyes and the fatigue or distress that they convey. Even the eyes that are closed or covered seem to indicate pain more than pleasure or fulfillment. That's a really powerful observation. Yeah, it's fascinating if we focus on the eyes because they're certainly all kind of looking in different directions. This figure here almost straight out at us as the viewer, along with this small child. This figure here focused maybe on the horizon, maybe, it's something else happening in the distance. I find my mind just wanders with all the possible narratives of what might be happening literally sort of right beside and around this group of people. And the fatigue, it's a really powerful word. And the kind of hollowness in the case of these eyes here. Veronica is saying that the hands have a powerful presence in the image. Yeah, I find I noticed one for the first time actually today. Like I said, I really am drawn to Kollwitz's work. And so I have spent quite a lot of time with pieces like this and this one, but I had never noticed this particular hand before, and just how huge it is compared to the one of the small child here resting against presumably their mother. And the hands, I don't know, do folks have other words to describe the hands? Because they certainly are predominant here. And in many cases, front and center, whether it's, this dramatic sort of anguish at the back, or these ones here in this protective grasp. Trudy's saying, yeah, that powerful hands, powerful love and protection of their children. Very nicely said. Yeah, the hands are very expressive and revealing of the feelings. Yeah, that's a great point. I think in some ways, there's a lot of stillness in this image, right? I get the impression, at least, that there's not some explosion or something that's just gone off beside them, that this is maybe after, and maybe I'm projecting because I know it's 1919, so maybe, the aftermath of World War I or war in general. But I do get the sense that figures are sort of out of immediate harm's way, and yet there's a lot to process, but there's this almost kind of silence or stillness to the piece. Maybe also because of this little sleeping baby. And yet that all of that pain and those big emotions are, just as Mary Lou was saying here, they're sort of expressed in the hands. That's maybe how the depth of this drama is really coming out. Almost kind of animalistic too, maybe. These, I find when I'm a mother, I imagine some of you are parents too, and that sort of just intense protection you feel for your children, and it's a big job being charged with the task of protecting them for their lives from things that you anticipate and things that you don't. Yeah, the kind of closeness here of this main figure, really grasping tightly to these young boys. Are there any other thoughts or feelings or observations that you'd like to share about this work? Michael is saying, even reading from the top left, reflecting on those things from which we can't protect them. Yeah, that's desperately difficult, isn't it? That try as you might, anticipate as much as we do as humans. Ultimately there are things that are unplanned that we can't protect little people from. Yeah. And often through no fault of our own, right? And certainly when we see what's happening in the world right now. So Bulu Atif is saying it depicts the struggles to protect children against all odds. And for that age, it was created 1919. It shows an incomplete family unit. Yeah, it looks like only one party in each family is trying to protect the children. Yeah, and certainly knowing what we do, about the history of World War I, very likely that was the case, right? That these were sort of fatherless children and husbandless wives, because the men likely would have gone off to fight at the front. And Ketje Kollwitz certainly would have seen this up front and personal. She did have one of her own sons went to fight in World War I and actually lost his life. And she also, her husband ran a medical clinic in Berlin. And so she was there, very present, and seeing folks come in all sorts of states of distress and fear and, life circumstances. And so what you see here, and especially kind of the experience of women and children, certainly is very much in evidence in a lot of the work that she created. Okay, let's move on to our next work. And again, we'll start in the same way. This time, I think maybe I'll give us 2 minutes because one didn't feel quite long enough. And within that time, I'll show you, I have 2 different angles. The next one is a sculpture. And so I'll show you sort of 2 different angles of the work. And I'll time us again for 2 minutes. Okay. So in some ways, a very different work of art. In others, I all of a sudden was, seeing a lot of commonalities with the Kate Kolwitz piece we looked at first. So yeah, I'll open up the floor. You can type in the chat, you can unmute yourself. What sort of words or feelings or observations came up when you were exploring this piece? I'll go back to the first, oops. Here we go. You can see the bear's face a little more clearly here. Another question I ask myself sometimes, if the words are hard to find, is what an artwork I think would sound like. And it might, be a type of music, or it might be a particular sound or note. So that could be a question too. Okay, so we've got a few responses here. So Camilla is saying the word that comes to mind is entrapment. Yeah, there's such an interesting contrast here between this really wild, strong creature and then this barbed wire all around. I spent a lot of time just now looking at, just the patterns of the wire here, and it, almost seems like electrified somehow. William is saying the bear's facial expression contains so much anguish. Yeah, there's that word again. I want to grab some clippers to remove the barbed wire. The wire also reminds me so much trash that gets left behind in our globe. Yeah, totally. Again, not necessarily about this particular moment in time, but I think Bill Nasogula, who's the artist here, is certainly concerned with a lot of climate change that's going on and other environmental issues. He is from the north, born in Tl'seyuqtut, Northwest Territories, and born at a time when there's a lot of transitions taking place between sort of traditional Inuit culture and then some big changes being brought up from down south. And so he really had access to both worlds and regularly comments on the impact that climate change is having, especially in the north. Bulu Atif is saying, at first glance, what I see is caged potential. Yeah, this is something that's so great about art, right? As we can look at it, and especially figurative pieces like this, we'd all agree, okay, we see a bear and there's barbed wire and it's trapped somehow. But then, going a little deeper, just as you've done, is what does that mean? Like, what does that make us feel? Do we relate to the bear? Do we relate to the wire ourselves? At what point in our life, could this have been a depiction of us in some way? I really like that idea of caged potential. And then it begs questions like, why is it caged? Is it an individual, that's restraining themselves in some way? Is it structures around that are preventing, kind of this full potential to emerge? And Trudy is saying, barbed wire trapping the bear could also look like an igloo. Yeah, a home that is a trapping. Yeah, that's so fascinating, isn't it? Because really the way that it's formed here does look almost like these little blocks of ice and the same shape of an igloo. And certainly in a lot of Inuit art, especially kind of before this modern period where a lot of Inuit artists began to explore more expressive themes and more kind of charged political issues in their work, igloos were quite prominent. And so there really might be something at play there. And I really appreciate what you say too, that home can be trapping, that on the one hand, it can bring a lot of comfort and safety and security and familiarity. And yet, at what point does that become entrapping in and of itself? We can all probably relate to this in different ways right now than we would have maybe, 3-4 years ago, because our homes have taken on a whole new meaning. I won't speak for all of us, but I really love being home. I'm pretty much a homebody most of the time anyway, but certainly felt somewhat trapped by home in different ways when it became also a workplace, also a gym, everything, a library. Carrie here is saying, the barbed wire is also in the shape of an iceberg. The disappearing ice trapping the polar bear and the anguished cry that it's making. Yeah, the expression on the bear's face here is just so big and so dramatic. And I think it's that for me, at least for this piece, that's where the sound comes out. I feel like I can almost hear the cry of this bear. And certainly, just as Carrie is saying, if we do relate it to, what we know about climate change in the North right now, certainly melting ice is a big problem for much of the wildlife. Michael is saying, in the first angle, the barbed wire really is suggestive of written script, man-made construct. The what is communicated, excuses for imposing human control or dominance over what is powerful and beautiful already. Ooh, wow. That's a really eloquent way of putting it. Yeah, and that idea of human script, it's so true that, it does almost look like writing. And, I think certainly thinking back at the history of colonialism and globalization, and certainly how the written word has, overpowered other ways of knowing and other ways of being and other ways of communicating, would be very relevant here, I think, too. Bulawatif is saying, having so much strength but not being able to utilize it. That's a really poignant. I noticed that especially in this angle. And just, the strength of these legs that you just feel like are made for running and climbing and just the power that is really constricted here. Yeah, having so much strength but not being able to utilize it. And again, just as I've done, could be interpreted sort of literally here, but then certainly can also be different kinds of strength, right? It doesn't necessarily mean brute physical force, but other strength that we might have and not be able to use. Geez, I thought that having 3 pieces in 45 minutes I figured we might end early, but no, actually, I feel like we could just keep going with all of these pieces. Mary Lou here is saying, one could look at this in 2 distinctive ways. So one, the bear is shaped like a polar bear, which are typically white, but this bear is black, denoting the death of polar bears' biodiversity due to pollution or climate crisis. Or 2, the wire is shaped like an igloo. Indigenous ways of knowing and knowledge, when applied, can protect biodiversity. So fascinating, Mary Lou. Yeah, and you're bringing us back again. It's so funny because I didn't select the Käthe Kollwitz work in this one, thinking of some of these overlaps and themes of anguish and the black and white. But now that I'm looking at these works alongside all of you, these things are coming back. Yeah, and the color choice is very striking here, certainly, especially knowing that it's a polar bear. Oh, and Jane here is saying, yeah, while a polar bear's fur is white, its skin is black. And so maybe this bear has been stripped naked. Again, yeah, literally or sort of poetically, figuratively. Thank you, folks, so much for these beautiful insights. Let's move on to our third work now. And this one, again, will take, I think, about 2 minutes. That felt better than one. And again, I have two different views of this particular work of art. So I'm going to share it with you now. Okay. So what came up for you while looking at this work? So Sheila is saying, crumbled but yet perfect. How we want life or world but can't. Oh, how we want our life or world to be, but we can't. So interesting. Crumbled yet perfect. Yeah, that idea is really powerful, sort of that things are perfect in their imperfection. And I find looking at nature always reminds me of that when we've got this beautiful maple tree in the backyard, and I would think that all the leaves would be the same, but obviously they're not. Each one is slightly different, and so it's not perfect or a perfect replication, and yet it is perfect in what it is. And Carrie's saying, all the weight of this marble, but the focus is the absence. Yeah, the empty space in the middle. And Veronica is saying something similar, a place to hide or escape for a while. Yeah, that's what's so neat too, right? Because it seems heavy, like it's on this big plinth and certainly made of rock, and there's a heaviness, and then all of a sudden there's this hole in the middle. And Mary Lou is saying thoughts of the universe and planets, the great beyond, mysterious curiosity, exploration, climbing into another world. Yeah. And William here saying, yeah, the clean cut circle reminds me of various stages of moon cycles, specifically from our vantage point on planet Earth. Yeah, this is one that for me, it's almost like an optical illusion, and it works on the image, and it also works in person. That, I mean, literally it is. There's a hole in the center, so it is hollow. And we have this contrast between, this outer circle that's textured and like someone had said, kind of imperfect and crumbly was a great word. And yet this one is, yeah, sort of the clean cut circle. And I notice that it's hollow, but then sometimes it just jumps out at me. I don't know if anyone had that experience, that it looks like the circle is actually this floating planet that actually is like popping forward, and that it's not empty at all. It's just like another universe. Anyone else have that? Maybe if I go back, I can see it on both, but this one may be a little bit stronger. That looks like the circle is popping out. Oh yeah, William had that experience too. Yeah, it really surprised me. Yeah, and that's probably where that planet came, right? Because when it does, it seems like it's sort of floating there. Janet is saying it makes me think of an oyster with a pearl. Yeah, that sort of hard shell and this kind of precious something, like kind of really magical on the inside. Anyone else, does the form remind anyone else of something else that you might see in your everyday world? And I've shown this work to, oh yeah, here was some, yeah, a donut, the moon. Yeah, the moon is really, it's quite amazing, because the alabaster here, Anish Kapoor didn't add anything, right? It's just much like marble, that there's different colors sort of within the rock itself. And so, yeah, there's just something about the way that the pink is on the inside that looks so much like a planet or the moon. Someone else is saying a donut. Yeah, there's a good one too. I've also heard sort of an avocado, like with that pit that's either the void, right? Or that when you cut it in half, it's kind of popping out at the top. Buluwatif is saying, it makes me think of how hard we try to mend and patch broken pieces, but still have a missing part. Wow, yeah, and then how to live with that hollow feeling. Yeah, I think Bulawatif, what you're saying reminds me so much of grief. I've been reading a lot just for other work that I'm doing about grief, and that, you know, how especially in Western cultures, we like to map it out. We say, oh, so it's like grieving period and it lasts this many days and these are the phases. And in reality, I think for anyone who's been through grief in whatever way, like, I mean, maybe losing somebody close to you, but also losing a thing, or moving to another part of the world and grieving the loss of what was familiar or a place that you love. There's no, it's really a continuum, right? There's no like, you're living with a lack, you're living with something that you're missing like so deeply. And so, yeah, how do you live with that missing part? And Veronica here is saying, it makes me think about George Melay's A Trip to the Moon. Ooh, I'm not familiar with that, but I'm gonna have to look that up. I wonder, Veronica, is this a book or is this a song or another work of art? A short film. Ah, okay, short film. Neat. Oh, I'm totally gonna look that one up now. I haven't seen enough short films lately. Michael is saying, I wanted to admire the textual contrast, thinking of the inner circle as mechanically perfect and the rugged exterior more natural. But then eyes are sort of like this and completely natural. Interesting. That's true, huh? The human eye and that sort of perfect circle that we've got there. Oh, a really interesting reflection. Yeah, nature is phenomenal, isn't it? Just all the shapes and textures and everything that were just designed by no one really knows how. Oh, it looks like and Michael's saying, okay, that's one of the very, very short, very first short films. We've got one of my colleagues behind the scenes sharing the link there. Maybe all of you knew about this, and I'm encountering it for the first time. Neat. Yeah. Great question, Angelina. So why is it called number 5? I could pitch that question back to the group. I'd be curious. We've got such an insightful bunch here today. So maybe some of you have thoughts on why it might be called number 5. One of the things that I do know about Anish Kapoor, he does quite a number. I mean, he's a painter, but he's done a lot of big sculptures too. Some of you might know, if you've traveled to Chicago, that sort of cloud gate. It looks like this bean in Millennial Park, this big sort of mirrored bean that, you know, is very different, you know, technically than this one. But to me, his themes of sort of limit and limitlessness and kind of being grounded in the everyday, and yet also, you know, just taken up by whatever it is that's beyond, is kind of a through line in a lot of his work. And so I think sometimes, you know, giving a piece a name like number 5 just lets us let our minds and our feelings and bodies take us wherever we want to go with it. And if it were called, you know, full moon, we might not be inclined to spend quite so much time with it, or to let our minds think about what it might, what else it might speak to. I think that sort of, yeah, missing piece, as some of you have identified. Well, thanks so much, everyone. It looks like we're already over our kind of allotted time, but I really feel like I could just stay here all day with all of you. I want to experience the entire collection with this group. And it's been really nice to be able to slow down and take in at least, these 3 pieces. But again, I do feel like it still wasn't enough time. And so I would encourage you, obviously today is officially slow art day, but there's nothing that stops you from coming to the AGO at any moment in the week and standing in front of a work, pulling up a stool, and just spending as much time as you need. We have a comment here from Michael. I hadn't realized that this was the same artist as Cloudgate. Yeah, but in both pieces, there's a sensation that the art is looking at you simultaneously. Oh, so nicely said, Michael. Absolutely. And especially now that someone had pointed out this eye thing, that, I think now I feel like this piece is looking at me in a whole new way than originally experienced. Oh my goodness, and someone was joining us from Chile. Oh my goodness, I didn't realize that. Well, that's one of the huge advantages of these virtual tours, isn't it? We can really tune in from anywhere in the world. And so thank you. I'm seeing all of your compliments and your gratitude in the chat, and I will reflect that back to you. So thank you so much for being here today. This was really, really nice. And wonderful way to experience the collection. And whenever you feel ready to do so, the AGO is waiting for you. And we've got a lot more pieces and great hours that you could just come and spend the day or 3 or 7 weeks, come back every day. Oh, good. And Sheila's booked her tickets already. Perfect. Well, thank you, everyone. I hope you have a great rest of your afternoon. And we'll connect again really soon. Take good care.